Good evening, or whatever time of day it happens to be when you're watching this video. I have just been informed that the new Errata and FAQ for Bolt Action 3rd edition has been announced. I think it is up, so we shall have a look through it. I have my rulebook for 3rd edition right here, and so we can compare some things. I don't usually do news and kind of wargaming, keeping up with the times kind of things, but Bolt Action is a game I play regularly, so it's just useful for me to read through because I actually want to make sure I'm playing the game correctly. Although I'm sure that the jokes about the erratas for Bolt Action will continue. There were plenty in the 2nd edition days, and that certainly hasn't changed. But let's get started. So, this is February 2025, and let's just crack on, start from the beginning, and see what there is. See if any of this is a massively significant change, or if it's just minor tweaks here and there. I suspect a little bit of both. So, page 82. So there's an interesting change in the emphasis of this rule. Effectively, it means the same thing. It's just the way it's worded has changed. We've gone from any model can hold fire if they wish, perhaps because they have limited ammunition, to models with limited ammunition may hold fire, for example, one-shot weapons and flamethrowers. In the rulebook, the original wording, you could hold back fire with any model, whereas in this case you now can't hold fire with any specific model unless they have a one-shot or flamethrower. Panzerfaust, for example. We've got a few things about spotters. I'm not entirely certain what this is trying to clarify. It's all written in a very different way, and I can't see necessarily which sentence is being changed. The first one, the first line there, it seems to be exactly the same as what's in my book, so doesn't seem to have been changed at all. Oh no. Well, that completely kills multiple launchers, as if the pins weren't enough and the fact that you can't use spotters weren't enough. Changing the minimum engagement distance of a multiple launcher to 36 inches now makes them completely useless, because almost all fighting in Bolt Action happens within 36 inches. And so all the howitzers with 36-inch minimum just aren't being used. We're noticing that a lot in our group, that howitzers are pretty much only being used direct fire, and multiple launchers don't have that option. So yeah, goodbye Katyusha, goodbye Howling Cow, goodbye Land Mattress. You shall be missed. You are now completely dead. Snap to action has a change. That is an unnecessary change. I think a better wording would be to say that officers that are off the board cannot use snap to action. Rather than just listing the different ways that they can be off the board, you just say if they're off the board, they can't use the ability. So this is a change. Originally, with artillery units in 3rd edition, all of the crew just have to be within an inch of the gun, which for particularly large guns means that they end up being quite spread out. In this case, we now have they must be in normal cohesion for an infantry squad, so within an inch of each other, and then also each model must be within 1 inch of any part of the gun. That means, yeah. So in the original wording, you could space out the models quite a lot, particularly for a larger artillery piece, meaning that blast markers would not cover many models at all, even with a large crew. But now, if each crew model has to be in a string of an inch with all the other crew, then yeah, we're going to get blast markers are going to wipe out whole artillery crews all in one go again. Actually, a 4-inch blast would hit 3 models guaranteed. Yeah, like no matter how you string them out. This second one on artillery is a problem. because enemies shooting at the artillery can draw line of sight to either the gun or the crew models and fire on them, but the range is measured to the center of the gun. That's not right, because it should be measured to the closest model, as that's how shooting at infantry works. I don't think it matters too much, because that's only when you're right at the edge of range. But I'm not liking that change. That means that, yeah, when the enemy is shooting into an artillery gun, it should be measured from, it should be measured to the closest model, whether that's the gun model or the crew model. But no, they're saying it has to be, the range has to be measured. Line of sight is to anything, but the range is measured to the, to the center of the gun. That's odd. Yeah, so clarification on the vehicles that failing a order test have to reverse away from the enemy, but they actually just move straight backwards. I'm pretty sure that in second edition it said that they pivot and reverse away, like away from the closest enemy. So pivot to face and then reverse away from the nearest, from a visible enemy. But in this case, it's just wherever they're pointed. So if you've come around and you end up, you might end up driving towards other enemy units. It's just based on where you are, although I don't think that'd come up very much. That makes sense, though. Yeah, we noticed this one. I believe I mentioned this in my live stream when I first looked at the rulebook. Quad heavy machine gun would get mounted on a vehicle would be 3 shots per gun, so you get 12 in total. But it says a total of 8 in the book, which is incorrect. The heavy machine gun would fire 2 shots, not 3. So I assume at some point during development, the heavy machine gun was still base 3 shots and then being halved, rounding up to 2. Whereas they have subsequently changed it to 6 shots, being halved to 3. Which means that heavy machine guns on vehicles are still getting 3 shots, which is reasonable. Heavy machine guns on ground, like heavy weapons teams, with a heavy machine gun get 6 shots. They're really nice. My Soviet Dushka really appreciates that change. So one for transport vehicles. End of first paragraph, delete the file. That does seem like an editing error more than anything. It's half of a sentence that's just there. Yeah, it doesn't seem to mean anything. Another editing mistake here. So someone has probably left in a note to say check term. Check one of the terms used in the sentence, but that check term is now just in the rulebook. That's kind of funny. I like that. If only you'd have, proofread, like done some robust checking before you sent it off to the publisher, we wouldn't be having this problem. It's a minor issue. It's not really. It's just a kind of funny that that's managed to sneak through. Let's see. We've got another change here for the armored platoon command vehicle. 188. Here we go. The armored platoon that we have been using a lot recently because we are playing tank war with the armored platoon. Ah, that's interesting. So there are some cases where a vehicle that's in the transport and tow category has the command vehicle or has access to the command vehicle special rule. And in that case, you can use that vehicle as a fighting vehicle in an armored platoon where you usually wouldn't be able to take, because you usually can't take transports and tows in an armored platoon. It's for fighting vehicles. But any vehicle with the command vehicle special rule can be the command vehicle in an armored platoon. That's useful. I don't have any vehicles that fit that description, or at least I don't think I do. I have to say that command vehicles, like actual command vehicles, are a little boring. They don't have as many guns. I mean, I'm sure that They're interesting for some, but not for most. They very rarely show up. I think I have seen the radio command vehicle 250, the little one, the 250. Someone had one of those a few months back. It's probably the only time I can remember seeing it. So Recce Infantry clarifying, because it says it two different ways on the same page. In one case it says that each unit must have its own transport vehicle, and the other time it says that the platoon must have enough transport for the whole platoon. And this is saying that the second one is correct, that so long as you can fit everyone in the platoon onto your transport vehicles, you're good to go. You don't necessarily have to have one each. So now we're into some things that might be really boring or actually might be really interesting. These are the army lists in the rulebook, which kind of are slowly becoming obsolete as the armies of books come out. So the inexperienced infantry for the Germans started with 5 models for 25 points, whereas it should be 35 points, 7 points a model. I wish they would just say 7 points per model, and you can have between 5 and 10 models. It's so much more concise and easier to understand than this squad has 5 models and is 35 points. And as a unit upgrade, you can buy more for 7 points each. I've ranted about this before. I don't like it. I'd rather just say 7 points each, 5 to 10 models. So easy. American Rangers are also having a change. If I can turn the pages. I like this one. Just an angry guy gritting his teeth. Slightly squinting, but still with his eyes open. Veteran Infantry, 6 models for 70 points, or 5 models for 70 points. Which one is correct? Yes, obviously. The numbers match. You were getting a free model out of the Rangers, no longer. Oh, that's odd. So in the Marines, particularly in 2nd edition, where pistols got the tough fighters rule, assault and tough fighters, which they don't get anymore, I would always pick out the 3 pistols because it's for extra 3 points. You fill up the squad with some tough fighters. But they've changed it here. In the rulebook, it's the same. My physical copy is the same as it was in 2nd. That you can have 3 models with pistols in addition to their rifle. But now, it's 3 models may replace their rifle with a pistol for minus 1 point each. So it makes them cheaper. And it massively shortens their range from 24 down to 6 inches. But it means that they're actually losing out because they don't get assault anymore. Assault and tough fighters. In some ways, it makes a veteran squad that little bit cheaper. But I'm not sure if it's valuable enough because it's only 3 points that you're saving. So, I'm not a fan of that. I prefer the old way. Although, yeah, in 3rd edition pistols, having a pistol and a rifle is meaningless. You just have a rifle. Oh no! So the M51 quad heavy machine gun, which is an infantry heavy machine gun. 4 of them. So it should be, what's that, 6, 12, 24. It should be 24 shots. That's ridiculous and awesome. But they've added to the cumbersome special rule to say that it counts as a vehicle for determining the number of shots. That's mean. It does make it a bit more reasonable because that's now 12 shots rather than 24. But yeah, probably sensible from a balance point of view. Am I reading this for the British right? To page 235, infantry section unit entry. Yes, so that's just your regular infantry for the British. The entire squad being given engineers for plus 1 point per model. But these can be inexperienced. Can the British now take inexperienced engineers in an engineered platoon? Although I'm actually not seeing an engineer's entry anywhere So maybe that's why. Ah, yes, we're seeing something here that we've discussed a bit before. Within the Home Guard, they can take a few models without rifles, 5 points each. And it used to be the case, and this has gone back and forth a little bit, that unarmed models cannot shoot or attack in any way, even in close combat. Whereas now they can fight in close combat. They can't shoot because they've got no rifle, but they can fight in close combat. You can assume that they've picked up a rock or a stick or a knife or something, which makes just so much more sense. British Special Forces can take one more model in the squad, going from 9 to 10 as the maximum size. British anti-tank gun, the light anti-tank gun only gets a rotating platform. Here's another weird thing that I really am just not liking. It gives a list of all the special rules. And that's like Recce, if Stuart Recce option is taken, well, yeah, obviously. The way that the unit entries are written, the way it's laid out, is very awkward. And this is just... I mean, the change doesn't really matter. It's just the unit entry is very awkward. Crusader Anti-Air Mark 1 is open-topped. So the Soviet Forward Observer... Wow. 1 point cheaper for the assistance for regular and veteran. 10 to 11 points and 13 to 14 points. That's such a big change. Such a big change. If you take a full squad, that is 2 points difference. It should be clear. It should be the same between factions. For the Soviets, we're also getting rid of the unarmed models cannot fight in close combat. Scanning through to a vehicle that I actually have, which is nice, although I have a Stuart as well, but not a Recce Stuart. So the ISU-152 and the SU-152. The sheer size and explosive power of the shell, the howitzer has Pen +4, but that is now changing to the howitzer has Pen +5. Hang on. A heavy howitzer would be blast 4-inch, which means it has a Pen 4. So they don't need a special rule to say that, but having it Pen 5 actually makes the rule meaningful. Yes. Fine. Moving into some of the Japanese entries. Engineers going for the regular squads. Yep, similar to the British. The prime movers are gaining the slow special rule, which sucks to be them, but that's a massive armoured tractor. So, sorry, not armoured, but just a massive heavy-duty tractor. So they're not particularly fast. Oh, what's all this then? Are we going backwards? We are going backwards. Okay, so not everything's in order. So it says here that the Soviets can field all of the listed vehicles as Lend-Lease. Stuart, Valentine, yep, the Lee, good old Lees, know all about them. Churchill, the White Scout car, that's fairly popular. Jeeps, although the Gaz equivalent is basically identical rules. Oh, Bren Carrier. I would like to see the Bren Carrier have the Dushka upgrade, because that is something that the Soviets did. They used a lot of their own light machine guns and medium machine guns, but they also used heavy machine guns on the Lend-Lease Bren Carriers. So do the British have a list of Lend-Lease vehicles? Because the British also, I can see American vehicles in their selection. So they're not so much as a special rule to say, oh yes, these Lend-Lease vehicles, they're just in the standard. Consistency is not a thing. Consistency just is not a thing here. Okay, that is all of the errata changes to all of the entries in the rulebook sorted. Let's read through the FAQs and see if there's anything important in here. Do unarmed models fight in close quarters or not? And this is now clarified to being yes, they do. And we've seen that rule being removed from a lot of the units that did have it before. Swings and roundabouts, it has been for a while that some unarmed units can and some unarmed units specifically can't. Whereas now it is a universal. Units in a transport that is destroyed because it retreats from the table are now also destroyed along with the vehicle. That sucks. Key positions has a whole bunch of objectives, and it might come to the point where you run out of space to put them, and in that case you just do not place the last objectives. If you run out of space, you don't get them. Mounting a weapon to a vehicle that reduces its transport capacity also reduces its towing capacity. That makes sense. Yeah, so the next one is about the Stummel, the SKZ 251/9, which is a transport vehicle. It still has a transport capacity, although reduced, because it mounts a light howitzer in the front. And so the vehicle is in the SPG. It's a fighting vehicle, not a transport vehicle, even though it has a transport capacity. But because of that, kind of the way that they balancing the game, it has to be used in the fighting vehicle slot, not the transport vehicle slot. Oh, that's interesting. So if you're using indirect fire on an enemy artillery piece and you wipe out the crew, but the enemy then recrews the gun, you maintain the 0 on that, so you'd still be rolling 2s in future. That's interesting because usually that rule applies to the unit, which would be the crew, not the gun. And so when the crew die or are wiped out, the target would be lost. But in this case, they're clarifying no, that the gun itself is the target. So even if it's recrewed, you can still target that with the same ranging. Interesting. Next one's talking about recrewing and combining crew of different experience levels. And it seems like the way that you consider it is that the unit that the crew are coming from is destroyed, disbanded, and the models become members of of whatever crew they're joining. So the rating and the pins and all of the other factors of the crew that they're joining is what the amalgamation will become, rather than bringing any of their attributes along with them, which makes it simpler. If an artillery crew on a transport vehicle is destroyed, the artillery gun itself survives somehow and can be recrewed if there's another unit. There's a lot of rules for recrewing, and there just is very rarely any case where you would have the opportunity to recrew. I guess it is the case that in 3rd edition you would have 2 or 3 guns in an artillery battery, but so few people are taking artillery. The howitzers are gone. It's all anti-tank guns, and even those people really aren't taking many of them in my experience. So recrewing just isn't that common. Clarification on the spotters. So any spotter or observer can act as a spotter for any indirect, except for multiple launchers, in your force. It's not just the units that have the option for a spotter. And that includes vehicles. So the vehicles with howitzers get to take advantage of spotters. Although, again, the minimum engagement distance means that it's very rare that they ever get to actually shoot. Almost always we're getting direct over open sight shots rather than indirect shots from all of these. Can the last operator of an artillery piece be removed to take over another? Yes. That last operator can leave the gun, which counts as destroyed. This is the opposite of recrewing a gun without a crew. So yeah, the unit, the one model leaves the gun and joins a different gun. I guess you'd remove the order die, but then add in a new order die if they're going to a gun by themselves. Weird how many rules there are for recrewing when it just happens so rarely. Can a tank with slow load act first on the turn if activated by an officer's snapped? And that's a yes, because the first Order is the officer, not the vehicle, and the vehicle's now the second. So it's a way people have noticed to get around the slow load rule, although you are using the officer's ability to do that, so I think that's fair. You're using the officer in a way that an officer should be used. Oh, okay. I'm going to have to check on this. I'm going to have to check on this a lot. How many indirect fire units can a spot or forward observer spot for per turn? And can they make their own fire order in the same turn? They can spot for a single friendly unit firing indirect. Not all of them. Oh, you didn't answer the second part of that question. Can they make their own fire order? That's a problem. That's a problem. Because that means we need a lot more for the indirect batteries of like 2 or 3 howitzers, 2 or 3 mortars. You actually do need a spotter or observer each. Not a fan of that. Clarification on fighting vehicles that happen to have a transport capacity don't count as transports, and so don't suffer from the enemy proximity rule. Oh, warplanes. I use warplanes every now and again. Let me just look up the rules for the forward air observer to make sure I'm understanding what is being clarified. Forward air observers is 116. Yes, so the fighter bomber and the ground attack aircraft that drop medium or heavy howitzer shots, you do actually physically place the template as if you were firing a howitzer. And you would have to work out the number of hits, because there's no, unless you use the building's like random result, D6 and 2D6 for the number of hits. You would have to use the template for that. Can I take a vehicle that does not have command vehicle and upgrade it to make it a platoon commander if I do have a vehicle which already has command vehicle available? Yes, you can. That's actually a point. If command vehicles, because you could have a command vehicle that's actually a command vehicle, and then also another vehicle that you give the command vehicle special rule to, and have multiple command vehicles, which would give you multiple snaps. But then you're also taking a command vehicle, a dedicated command vehicle, and they're rubbish. So, yeah, I'll allow that. Oh, yep, this question here is going back to what we read earlier. A transport vehicle with the command vehicle rule has an exception that it now can be put as the armoured platoon commander, whereas usually that would have to be a fighting vehicle, not a tow. I like this one. Once the escape move is done, turn the vehicle's dice sick to advance or run. I like that, because you're taking... that should be die, not dice, the singular. Sick in the square brackets, parentheses, is, of course, spelling is correct, basically. The original got it wrong, and I'm copying directly from that. But yes, the order die should be moved. It should be placed on either advance or run, whichever was used by the vehicle in an escape reaction. That makes sense. Oh, how much more of this have we got? This is getting terribly dull. If an enemy unit is in base contact with an obstacle, can my unit move into contact with the opposite side of the same obstacle and shoot them to negate the cover save? So it's assumed that an obstacle is no more than an inch thick. So your unit cannot move into contact with the same obstacle unless you're charging them, which means that they will always benefit from cover, because the obstacle will always be in between you and them. Consider assaulting them instead. Yes, thank you, Warlord. We've made assault rubbish, so I don't think so. The fact that defenders are getting to fight first in a game where, in a time period where attackers in close combat would be chucking grenades, it really should be the attackers are fighting first. Attackers should fight first, and the defenders get some kind of cover save, and then the defenders fight back and the attackers do not get a cover save. That's how I would do it. A long linear piece of terrain that is thicker than an inch should it be treated as an obstacle or rough ground or terrain? As normal, agree beforehand with your opponent what these count as. That's actually an important part of wargaming, is that you have a quick chat with your opponent before every game, and we do it at our group even though we use the same terrain on all the boards. Essentially, the same bushes and walls and things go across all of our boards. And so we basically play it the same way, but we always just clarify, this is hard cover, this is soft cover, this is a building, this is ruins, so on and so forth. It's just nice to make sure you're on the same page when you're playing a game, rather than getting halfway through and going, oh no, I thought this was hard cover, but it's actually a ruin. I wouldn't have, you would have behaved differently if you'd have known differently. So best to have that little, just a quick chat at the beginning, just so you know what the terrain is going to be. If an Armies of book does not include some of the common transport vehicles, can I still use them from the rulebook? Yeah, so we've got normal truck, horse-drawn limber, a field ambulance, a wheeled artillery tractor, a light truck, which is an 8 model, and a civilian car, which is essentially identical to a Jeep. So everybody can take those because they're so common that everyone would have access to those in some way, shape or form. And the differences between like a Gaz and a Bedford and a Studebaker doesn't matter. There's a mention in one of the high explosives that saves happen before damage rather than the other way around. It should be damage rolls first and then saves. I still think that the entire game should be made around rolls hit, roll for cover, roll for damage, because it bounces back and forth between the players, so it's more interesting. But also things like vehicles as well, it did mention that you can roll a cover save before you work out all of the damage, which is kind of a complex thing to go through. It's the same for infantry. Just keep it consistent. Keep it consistent. I just prefer roll to hit, cover save, and then the casualty roll or damage roll against vehicles. But that's not how it's supposed to be. I'm pretty sure there's talk here of the airstrike being used against a building and getting the strafing fighter. Pretty sure the strafing fighter shoots an autocannon, and so you could take the 1-inch HE autocannon. Is that right? Is that right? No, that's not right. It specifically says that it's 2d6 with a plus 2d6 hits with a +2 pen value. It is not an autocannon. It's equivalent to an autocannon, a light autocannon, but it doesn't actually say autocannon, so you would not get the option of using HE. So yeah, you're not shooting HE, you don't get to blow up a building with the strafing fighter. Yeah, again, clarification on terminology. Some models can have a submachine gun, and some models can replace the rifle with a submachine gun. In both cases, you lose the rifle, but it doesn't necessarily read that way. And it's only if the specific entry says, in addition to other weapons, that you get to keep both. And that used to be how pistols worked, but we mentioned that that's changed for the Marines. And that's also how Panzerfausts work. It's a one-shot weapon, and you get a rifle or submachine gun in addition to the Panzerfaust or a Sturmgewehr. Does the Tachanka move as a wheeled vehicle? Yes, it does. Good to clarify that, because it's a... Oh, good grief. Even though it's horses, that means that your horses can move 1224. Horses suddenly got far. That's really fast. And on a road, it would be 48. Good grief. That doesn't seem like it should be that way, because cavalry have always been faster than a like horse-drawn carriage of any description. I disagree with this, although good to clarify, but I disagree. It should be... What are horses? How fast do cavalry move? So cavalry are 918, but a Tachanka is 1224. Yeah, that's silly. But that's how it is. I still need to convince one of the crazy guys at my local group to play with. I think we worked out you could bring 96 Tachankas in 1,000 points. We should definitely do that. It's very silly. Can you have green and shirkers at the same time? Yes. Can you shoot from one floor to another within the same building? No, you can't. And that is, again, something that I disagree with, because shooting through the floor or the ceiling or chucking grenades through holes that you've made in the floor or ceiling is definitely something that happened constantly in building fighting. But nope, the floor is an impenetrable barrier in this game. Next one is, can an SU-76I take armor-piercing ammunition? Yes. Can units outside buildings shoot enemies in building if another floor has friendly troops? No, you can't, because the 1-inch friendly fire rule apparently is two-dimensional, not three-dimensional. If units from opposing forces both end the turn on ambush and wish to try to set off the ambush, how do you decide the order? You roll off. I would actually say if you've just got a couple of units, you can roll off. But if you end up with quite a few, which is probably fairly rare, but if it happens, do another little round of dice bag. Like, select all units that you want to put to set off the ambushes, put them in the dice bag, and see how they go. But yeah, if there's just one or two, roll off, and you should be fine. So heavy autocannons are heavy guns for the purpose of movement, yep. And you can even have more than one command vehicle. So we're bouncing back and forth between subjects. They haven't necessarily ordered the questions here. So if you have dedicated command vehicles, you can have multiple of them, but you can only give one vehicle the mandatory command vehicle to be your platoon commander. But you can have multiple dedicated command vehicles and get lots of snaps out of it, I guess. Although you still can't snap a snap, so you can't chain them. In panic caused by foobar, running as fast as possible towards the closest table edge, they can get into a transport or building if that brings them closer to the table edge than just running. But they can never assault, and that makes sense. They're in a panic. They're trying to get away, not get charged into even more trouble. Although there can be cases where the closest enemy is actually also along the way to the closest board edge, which means you would end up closer to your enemy at the end of a turn. So panic on foobar can be very dangerous, very bad for the squad. But at that point, they're probably having a bad day anyway. If a unit's in base contact with an empty building, can another unit enter it? Ah, interesting. So this is the first time I've seen something like this. If a model is touching a building and an enemy unit gets into the building, they have to be an inch apart. And so the first unit has to be moved an inch away from the building. Now that is the first time I've seen enemies' movement forcing your models to be moved to maintain the 1 inch. That's an interesting precedent for that type of thing. Can you please explain the interaction between at full strength and commissar and the green in commissar? Commissar's rule takes precedence, so the squad re-rolls the order test once only. Green is triggered. And yes, green is triggered by the casualty. I think, yeah, at full strength means you get a re-roll, but also commissar means you get a re-roll. But you can only ever have one re-roll on the same roll, so you can't do both. But if there's a commissar nearby, he's shooting someone. That's the meme way that the commissars, they never did that historically, but That's the memes, so that's what's in the game. Cannon officer mounted on a horse if your force includes cavalry units. So long as all of your mandatory units in the platoon are mounted on horses. So you actually need to have 2 cavalry squads, and then your officer can have can be mounted on a horse for 3 points per model. And is that just anyone? That's cool that you can have anyone on horses. I don't have enough horses. I've had them in my painting collection for a little while. I haven't got around to them, but I've got some Cossacks on the way. I need to get a bit of sculpting done, some fur, some big fur coats. Oh boy, here we're nearly there. Just 2 more pages. Stick with it. So the Ziz-3 and the 25-pounder both counts as howitzers, but can also fire as anti-tank guns of various types. And so when they're firing as an anti-tank gun, they use the special rule of the anti-tank gun, and therefore do get the +1 to hit. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. I approve of that. In a Japanese heavy weapons platoon, how many suicide anti-tank teams can I include? Because each original slot becomes 3 slots for the suicide team. Just 1 AT team slot can be replaced by 3 suicide teams. So in a rifle platoon, you have 1 anti-tank rifle and 3 suicide bombers. In a heavy weapons platoon, you have 0-3 anti-tank rifles, 0-2 anti-tank rifles, and yeah, okay. So you get 3 options, and one of those options can become... It's almost like they should be, even though they're separate on the board, it's like a spotter. If they're separate on the board, they should have a unified order die, and they all move together. That might make them a bit too powerful if you can set them off at the beginning of a turn and have 3 suicide bombers jumping around across the whole board. Yeah, maybe that's a bad idea. If a unit of fieldcraft assaults an enemy on rough ground, does the enemy not gain defensive positions? Correct, they do not. So the units would strike simultaneously. This is something that I liked from the Case Blue at the end of second. The Alpini that I was going to run had they changed the name, but it's effectively what fieldcraft is now. So yeah, charging not buildings, but charging units in rough ground, so trees and rubble. Can I have a rear-facing turret-mounted medium machine gun, even if the main gun does not fire? Yeah, I think so long as you don't have the small turret or a rule that limits what guns can fire, you can fire both guns in the same turn, but you have to position the turret so that the fire arc of the main gun is over there and the rear gun is over here. So you need 2 opposing enemy units. But yeah, if you were just going to fire the machine gun, you'd turn the turret backwards and shoot it. We do that a lot with the JS2 and the Chiha. Page 98, the column set. Oh, okay. We're going to have to sit and read this one. Let's turn to the page. Let's distract ourselves because we have to read all of this. On page 98, the column 1, it says that you should place the center of a HE on or between the bases of a target unit, covering as many models as possible, and not clip any friendly models. On the same page, in the second column, it says that only the 2 criteria are covering as many models as possible and not clipping any friendly bases. Which is it? First column applies you are targeting a 1-model unit. You must place the center on the model. The second column says you can place the template however you want. When firing HE on a single model unit, you must place the template on the base of that target's model. As there is only 1 model, it cannot be between bases. The center point can be anywhere on the base of that model, so long as the criteria of covering as many models, in this case only 1, and not clipping any friendly models, are met. In the case of vehicles, you must place the template in the center of the vehicle. Okay, I was going to actually mention that because we've had that discussion a few times. When firing HE against a vehicle, you have to center the template on the center of the vehicle, which kind of sucks, and it's also kind of not quite realistic, because it would explode on the closest corner, but I guess that gets a bit complicated when you have to write rules for that. And people are going to take advantage of anything you write. So, during a UMen snap to action, can a platoon commander order just one unit? Or do they have to do two? Yes, so you don't have it, so it's up to 2 units. It's not strictly 2 units. I guess it's if there's only 1 unit nearby, you could only do 1. But if there's more than 1, you don't have to use them. Special abilities of officers and other HQ units mounted on transports, so long as they're in a soft skin or an open top. Does this mean an observer in an open top or soft skin can call airstrikes? No, they cannot, because they have to issue a fire order, and you can't issue a fire order when they're in a transport. The sentence allows use of passive abilities, but not the actual orders. Deploying infiltrators in story scenarios in the start of game phase is done after deployment, before first turn. Yeah. A lot of the time we're doing the like a second round of dice pulling. So everything that deploys first deploys by dice, and then you put all of your infiltrators dice in the bag to pull the dice again. Snipers and observers, depending on how many each player has. We're seeing less of them these days. It used to be that everyone and their cat had a sniper and a spotter for the mortar, at the very least, if not maybe some others as well. But we're seeing less of that. So a unit that's had its formation broken does not have to specifically combine itself, kind of bring themselves back together. But when they next move, they do need to re-establish formation. That's interesting. So if you had a squad, I don't know, you had like a light machine gunner sitting on a corner, and some of the other models were exposed and they got taken out, all of the other models are behind hard cover and just the light machine gunner is exposed, you wouldn't have to move the other models up to regain your coherency. You could just keep shooting that light machine gun on a fire order. But when you do move, you have to make sure that they come together again. Oh, okay, this changes everything. Or it changes this one rule. Units hit by the splash of HE do not take pins. So only the unit that's the target of HE takes pins. Any other unit may take damage but does not receive pins. Similarly, the unit that's clipped may not go... Oh, a unit that's clipped by HE may not go down as a reaction, as it's not being shot at itself. That's actually important enough that I'm going to send that to my local group, because that's a change in how we've been playing it. So, page 157, flamethrowers against buildings. Yeah, we've got page number issues again. I had to deal with this a lot in 2nd edition, because there was no, other than Germany, there was no Armies of 2nd edition books. So the Armies of Soviet Union 2nd edition book, what didn't exist, and so you were using the Armies of Soviet Union 1st edition, which had all the page number references to the 1st edition rulebook. And so all of the page numbers were wrong. Or like whenever it said, go to this page number in the rulebook, it was wrong, because it was referencing the previous version of the rulebook. Oh, does Soviet body armor apply in close combat? Yes. That's good to know. Ooh, that makes my tank riders veterans with body armor. I like that. Page 116, rookie pilot. The opponent chooses the new target, but who places the aircraft? The player controlling the forward air observer. Yeah, okay. So the opponent only chooses the target, but the player with the air observer does everything else like normal. And then finally, there is just a couple of... are these extra missions or are these replacement missions? Nope, they're probably references to... Yes, okay, let's read through it. Let's read through it so that we understand what we're doing. Officers can use their special abilities on friendly units within range of an opening of a building. If the officer is inside the building, is the opposite also intended? Yes, yeah, that makes sense. So if there's a doorway or a window or a broken part of a wall, officers can interact through that opening to a unit that's on the other side, whichever way around it is. When a unit on first wave or reserve comes onto the table from any point on the player's deployment zone edge, can they come from a point on the short table edge as well? Oh yeah, if you're playing on a table quarter, yes. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that makes sense. That's just the table edge. Sometimes it's your long table edge, sometimes it's the edge all around the deployment zone. So a lot of the stuff in the rulebook, the missions actually have the deployment zone edge is all around the deployment zone rather than the long table edge. And that's what these pictures here are clarifying. So for the blue player, this is your deployment zone, and your deployment zone edge goes all the way around your deployment zone. Yeah, that makes sense. And that is the end of the errata. So I'm sure you're all bored to absolute death of hearing me talk about this. I've just noticed something as I was scrolling back, about to end the video. Talking back to multiple launchers, the errata here says that this is where the minimum engagement is increased to 36 inches. And it says, this errata replaces the previously published multiple launcher errata and is not in addition to it. Does that mean that the pins thing has gone away? It's still a bit rubbish, because 36 inches is almost all of the fighting happens within 36 inches in a bolt action game. So it's a bit rubbish. Anyway, I might have to check up on that. But that is the February 2025 3rd edition bolt action errata and FAQ. And for anyone who is still awake, post a comment in the description. Post a comment in the comment section below, not in the description. Only I can do that. Post a comment below to say if you enjoy this type of thing, if you want to discuss anything specific about this, or if you have any ideas of just a better way of me making these videos. I do like to kind of keep up to date with things and have a discussion with people. But if there is a specific, like a better way of doing it that you can suggest, I'm open to options. But for now, I think I should let everyone go off to sleep, because you're bored to death of hearing me natter on about this. So thank you very much for watching. I'm ED-SKaR, and I always will be.